Welcome to the Balancing Act Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Strafford. Today, Andy and I are going to kick off a mini-series entitled Nobody Wants to Think Anymore. As we look past the attention-grabbing headline, of course, the purpose of this mini-series is to explore the important future-facing skill of critical thinking. Andy, I don't want to think too critically about this. How are you doing? How's life? I want to check in first before we dive into a meaty topic like this.
Yeah, life is great. It's also stressful because we're in the last kind of throes of writing the next book that we'll be publishing later this year, realistically. And it's always a very nervous time when you're getting close to pencils down on something where you could talk a lot more, but you don't want things to turn into a 500-page tome that nobody's ever going to pick up and read or use as a doorstopper.
Very good.
The other typical application of a book like that, and I've written them before, there have been technical accounting books, is as monitor stands.
Right, laptop prop. Yeah, exactly. Yep. As funny you say that. As a virtual video producer, I've many a time said, "Hey, do you have maybe a dictionary nearby or something nice and meaty that you can put your laptop on top of to get your eye line?" Well, I'm very excited to hear that you're near pencils down. That is, I'm sure, as you were saying, a anxious time. But I am somebody who never puts the pencil down when I'm writing. So I just have like 4 or 5 different 200-page things that never get done. So that might be a character flaw, but we can talk about that on a very different episode of the Balancing Act. I think, we've talked about not wanting to work. We've talked about so many different topics through this, but critical thinking and the idea of how that applies across life, but more importantly, the workplace, is such an important topic right now and will continue to be as we see these debates about what college is meant to be, what schooling is meant to be, and what our workplace learning models are meant to be. Obviously, critical thinking is up there with the empathy we've talked about and the people skills. I do want to ask the obvious question, though. You started with the salacious headline. You gave us some meat on the bone here to dive in, but why? Like, what do you think drives this topic by stating what you did?
Yeah, I think we can just all benefit from taking a step back and building our critical thinking skills. We're at a very dangerous point in our society and our economy, in the history of our country, where we're so divided, and we have. We have very unbalanced sources of how we get our news and how we consume information and how we make decisions about what we're going to follow and what we're not. And I'm seeing a lot of blind followership happening in our society right now that I think is a real danger. And I saw. One of our great 50 states in the United States has a flag that has the statement, "United we stand, divided we fall." And, I never thought that I would say this in my lifetime, but gosh, divided we fall is becoming a very real potential circumstance. And so if this little miniseries can somehow bring folks back towards center, where we're making better decisions, better informed decisions through the process of critical thinking, we'll all be better off.
We have talked, though, about the importance of followership, right? The premise from your book and from the podcast way back in episode 4, and their followership is a good thing. What's different here? What are we supposed to take away from differences between the two?
Yeah, in that context, we are talking about leadership and how leaders tend not to be great followers. And, this is all part and parcel of critical thinking and the concept of unconscious bias, which we'll talk about a little later in the episode. But that train of thought was really to help leaders understand that they can't always be leaders, that there are circumstances where they have to take a step back and follow, and do so in the right order, in the right proportions, based on their position. And critical thinking certainly has a lot to do with that. But I'm talking here more about blind followership and just getting on a train and going with that train, irrespective of its message, that I think is so dangerous right now.
Understood, and makes contextually a lot of sense of how we're going to dive further into it. And I think now is as good a time as any in the podcast to do just that. What exactly is critical thinking?
Yeah, so I've done some research
Excellent.
on this topic, as you might imagine. Having earned a PhD in finance from the University of Iowa, I like to fancy myself as a decent critical thinker, having been through that process of research and analysis and information from multiple sources. But I did a little research here, and I'm just going to read the definition as posed by a pair of authors, Scriven and Paul, back in 2003, define critical thinking as the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and or evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication. And all of that then is a guide to some belief or action. Right. This is why I think, we've got the cart before the horse here, that we form beliefs and we take action before doing the aforementioned hard work to come to those opinions and conclusion. And the authors go on to suggest, and I'm reading again, and I'll quote the source, which is really important, to suggest that critical thinking is based on universal intellectual values that transcend subject matter divisions. Clarity, accuracy, precision, consistency, relevance, sound evidence, good reason, depth, breadth, and fairness are all part of the equation. So in that definition, or what followed from that, is clearly the word division.
Yep.
So the authors here have thought carefully about division. The other phrase that I would point out is evidence. So we talk about evidence-based decision making, and that's going to be very important for us. And then the last word that really gets pulled out of all that is the concept of fairness. That there is this equity or fairness doctrine that kind of thread that runs through all of this.
I love I don't love that it happens, but I love that you pointed out the idea of believing something before you've learned about it. It is so prevalent right now, and it reminds me of, from a learning perspective, I remember learning about unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence, and the stages of learning, right? And it feels like there are a lot of unconscious, I'm not going to say incompetent people because it's very rude, but people who are coming to beliefs without actually doing not even the research, the sort of bare minimum to understand a topic. And that's polarized because of social media. I'll acknowledge that. It's not anything new per se, but we are seeing it. And I think you're pointing it out here from a critical thinking standpoint of not taking the time to do the work, not taking the time to learn about these things is really hindering a lot of people in growing in both a business sense and a personal sense. As we talk about critical thinking, a little bit of a segue alert here, but many key skills of the future list, World Economic Forum being the one that really stands out, the Conference Board and others, they all include critical thinking in some sort of top 10, right? You see it in that list somewhere. Realistically, from your point of view, what does somebody have to do to hone the skill of critical thinking?
Yeah, so critical thinking is a higher order set of processes. It relies upon a subset of sub skills, for lack of better terminology, that we'll call them, and some of those sub skills are the ability to analyze, the ability to make an inference based upon a broad set of data, the ability to effectively communicate, the ability to self-reflect, to take a pause. We talk about a half halt in my book, Balancing Act, to just okay, check yourself. Is this what I truly believe? The skill of problem solving, and then creativity and curiosity. You have to have some level of ability to be curious, to think critically, and that going back to self-reflection, when we talk about critical thinking and the dangers of critical thinking, you can be an awesome critical thinker, and if you're applying it for selfish motivations, to take a broad set of data and bend it and twist it to whatever narrative you want it to say.
Lies, damn lies, and statistics, Andy.
Yeah. Well, that is an application of critical thinking, but I would say that can be useful, of course, right. But you have to be aware that, just that sub skill of awareness, of being aware of all that surrounds you, I think is incredibly important. So, I point us back to our elementary schools, our middle schools, and our high schools. We talk about critical thinking in a college or university setting, a higher education setting, but you really got to set that foundation early in schools and homes. And I stress homes because a lot of your ability to think critically and a lot of your unconscious bias comes from what happens around the dinner table and what you see, the actions that follow the words of your mentors and your parents and the coaches that surround you. So bottom line is we've got a lot of work to do. This isn't just a higher ed issue. This isn't, hey, you're an adult, start thinking like an adult. We got to draw the line back quite a ways, because these sub-skills that I'm talking about communication, if you don't have those robustly honed, then your ability to think critically is significantly hampered.
A couple of things popped into my head just to hammer down a little bit of what you said. The idea of curiosity. Right. And this is a former podcast partner of mine, a man Mike Palmer, loves to use the word zeitgeist. And I don't know if this is still in the public zeitgeist, but Ted Lasso, the television show that caught be curious, not judgmental. And it's not a Walt Whitman quote. It's misattributed, but it is such a fascinating way to approach life. Because when you're judgmental, you're not learning new things. You're not trying to learn about someone or something. And this goes back to beliefs that are closely held without a reasoning why. And that's the other thing that pops into my head is from a very early age, we've been challenging our kids in this house to ask why. Not to ask why, in a negative or pushing way, but why does this work this way? Why is this happening? Why did this happen? Historically, mathematically, scientifically, ask the why. As a former journalism student, the 5 W's mean a lot to me. And I think that's another way of thinking critically, right? Of really breaking down who, what, when, where, why, and obviously you throw how in there for a lot of people. But fascinating. I think you're hitting on a lot of key points around how to reframe this conversation from your salacious headline to this really negotiable and understanding way of thinking about critical thinking. But I guess for this podcast, I've often said I love your book. It's applied personally to me, but it's a business book. It's management. It's people. So how does critical thinking? Why does critical thinking matter in a business environment?
Yeah, it's all so good decisions are really important throughout our personal lives and our business lives. Uh, People and business leaders that don't make good, thoughtful decisions get burned. And they get burned more often than those that make good decisions. So to avoid entropy in
Right.
your business, to make better decisions. The principles of critical thinking are incredibly important for you to understand as a leader, and to get out of your own head and consume information from multiple sources and be really thoughtful. Listen. Listening is another sub skill that we didn't talk about. That's very important for
Right.
for critical thinking. Use your ears and your mouth in that ratio. So, from a business perspective, I would absolutely say that critical thinking is an essential component to good decision making.
Now, Andy, I have to admit, I have used we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason on my children recently. But I'm sure your son, who helps produce these podcasts, doesn't like to hear that, because I'm sure he's heard it in the personal realm. But my middle child did get that the other day of, you need to
Nice.
listen to me. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, my dear. But I appreciate that from you. And I will say, for those listening, maybe some foreshadowing in my statements a couple of minutes ago, intentionally so, as we get to this next question. That's a lot to take in. It's a lot to remember and a lot to engage with on a daily basis when trying to think about all of these different aspects to critical thinking. Maybe I'm cheating a little bit here, but any shortcuts? Any ways to make this simpler?
Well, your 5 W's from journalism, the 5 Y's from continuous improvement
Sure.
or lean thinking. That's, I think, the shortcut is it. But it's not just 5 Y's. It's 5 Y's with an open mind and open ears, and the willingness to listen to a position that does not align directly with whatever belief system you have calcified in your head.
You can't make me do that, Andy. No, I'm kidding. No, just proving your point. But.
Right, exactly. So, the 5 Whys are a really important tool in many settings, but it's a head start to the critical thinking process. Is ask you got a problem statement in front of you. Instead of just taking the answer that somebody else gives you, ask why. And drill down, and you will get to root cause.
Right.
If you ask enough whys and structure those whys in different ways. Well, what we're really saying here is, can you ask good questions? So we talked about good decision making just a little bit ago, and the other key skill is the ability to ask a really good, thoughtful question, and that's what I mean. People always ask me, "Well, that 5 Whys construct is really dumb, Andy. I just asked myself why again, and it was the same why that I had before." Well, that's not the point.
Right.
The point really is to ask as many really good, thoughtful questions that have some basis in a why to drill down to root cause, and have those open ears and have that open mind to at least temporarily take that whatever it is into working memory, look at it, and determine whether that's useful information for the decision that you're making, or it's superfluous and is not really a good input to the decision making process.
Right. You're not telling people to be a toddler and ask why over and over again. Just keep repeating that. It's why and. It's why and.
Right.
It's why. Yeah, absolutely. It makes a ton of sense.
But as parents, we shut that down way too much and way too early. And I did that.
Of course.
Our sons, Nicholas and Brandon, why, Mom? Why, Dad? Why? And as a parent, you get tired of it.
Because I said so.
Yeah. because I said so. And we got to stop doing that. And we have to encourage 3, 4, 5-year-olds to ask more whys and ask more questions. And as parents, it's our obligation to learn and then coach and guide to the extent that we can. Sometimes you got to shut down the questioning.
Right.
Because
exactly.
it can't
You have
go
to
on
get to
forever.
Exactly. You have to get to a point where you have a conclusion, you have the root cause, you have to get there. I will say it was always fun with my brother, who has no children as of right now. When my daughters saw him, he would answer the questions. He'd just keep answering the why. And they loved it and he loved it because he just thought it was hysterical that they just kept asking why and he kept explaining things. But it worked because my wife and I could just take some time off and they still got their engagement. The 5 whys was something I was not aware of till working at our former employer, Kaplan, which has some lean tendencies in certain parts of the organization. And I loved it. I loved it because it was coming from an engineering world. Like it was coming from a lean or like the engineering of processes, but it made sense to my sort of critical thinking, my enjoyment of understanding, and got to the same place. Right, the root cause, the why. And asking good questions reminds me of improv. Yes, and. Okay, why and? I get my first answer. Let's keep drilling down until we get to the root cause. What other advice do you have for individuals who want to improve their critical thinking skills?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is recognize that our media sources have bias in them.
Right.
And almost irrespective of the media source. Now, there are some that are claiming to be only fact-based, but even those might have some unconscious hidden agenda. There are certainly media sources where people are walking around the halls saying, we are going to take a conservative stance only, or we are going to take a liberal stance only, and we are only going to send and support these messages. But most media sources have a more altruistic bent. The people that are working for them want to do good. But even then, you can get caught in echo chambers. You can get the unconscious bias can take over. So get your information from multiple trusted, and if you don't like the word trusted, replace it with the word credible.
Right.
So credible sources of news and information. If you find yourself listening to the same thing over and over again, you are by definition caught in an echo chamber. Hello, hello, hello. And you hear the same thing over and over and over again. Yep. And that calcifies attitudes. It calcifies behaviors. It gets that those unconscious biases just ground into granite in yourself. So that's really number one. And then commit to lifelong learning. If you're lifelong curious, you're a lifelong learner, you're always learning, you're always growing. By definition, you've got those open ears. You've developed that open mind. You're used to looking at problems from multiple vantage points because that's what the learning process is all about. And then the last piece of advice that I would have from a business perspective is invest in commercial acumen. And what I mean by commercial acumen, or what some call business acumen, is taking the blinders off and learning about how the business functions, not just your work, your set of processes, your standard work. You got to look outside the department and see where the flow happens. Where do my outputs become inputs for somebody else, and what is their way of working, and how do they consume my outputs and create value along the value stream? It's that kind of understanding of how a business works that is going to help lead to better decisions, better flow within the business.
It's breaking down the personal and professional silos that exist, or at least getting outside of them from time to time, letting yourself I like the idea of taking the blinders off. We just passed the Kentucky Derby. A lot of those horses wear blinders to not scare when running, but we need to take those off. We need to get scared's the wrong word, but I've been trying to work a lot on being more comfortable being uncomfortable, being just aware that being uncomfortable is a good thing. And when we avoid being uncomfortable, we typically avoid anything that we don't like or that we don't know. And when you do that, to Andy, your point, you're putting yourself in that echo chamber. You're putting yourself in the consistent warmth of the same thought over and over again. And while it feels comfortable, it can get pretty dicey over the course of time. Great topic.
What, let me just jump in here and ask you, was there an event in your career where critical thinking was just absolutely essential to a better outcome? That I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but how does critical thinking work for you?
Yeah, I think I like to think, I should rephrase that. I like to think critical thinking is a key component of all of my work. But to your point, even, listeners may not know, I'm mainly a video, audio, multimedia producer, right? So that can become a very echo chamber job where you're doing the same project over and over again. You're producing a podcast or a live stream or a video. I would say, I don't think I'm speaking out of school here. Kaplan went through some changes when I was there. And I think thinking critically through the implications of our internal live events and the messaging that we were providing was a big step for the new organization that came through. Candidly, I don't know if it landed where I wanted it to, but I think it was an exercise that allowed everyone to sort of, to peel some layers off the onion to an extent and really dive in and understand where the problems were and understand and shine some light on them and and I think that was through critical thinking and really being curious about the different functions that were coming together, the different workflows that were coming together. And there's still work to be done there. There's some great people still doing that work there. But I think those first couple live events where we were able to really dig into data, dig into messaging, dig into why are we even doing this? Why is this something we're doing every quarter was a very key part in my professional development and my professional trajectory in what I wanted to do and how I wanted to be a part of whatever company I'm going to be a part of.
Yeah, we just finished our mini series on Nobody Wants to Work Anymore, which is around new attitudes between self and work 100%. And our contributions to work. That those decisions about whether I engage in the Great Resignation or the Great Reset and I look for greener pastures somewhere else, that decision should rely upon critical thinking.
100%.
And unfortunately, we're reading some stories of some folks that have not applied critical thinking to those decisions, just jumped ship because, everybody else was, so I should try it too. And found out that the grass is not greener on the other side, that extra $1 of pay is not worth my pain and suffering that I am experiencing because my personal purpose doesn't align with the purpose of the business that I jumped ship for example.
Andy, I know we're coming to the end here, but it is a fascinating thing to me. I think we've made this analogy before. Work is a lot like dating to me, right? You see something on the surface, maybe on a dating app or whatever it might be, and you don't really know what lurks in the bottom drawer of the dresser until you move in together. And I think companies are largely the same way, right? They have marketing and HR arms that are out there to make the companies look great, right? To make them desirable. And sometimes you don't know the truth till you start working there. And you then have to make those critical decisions. Hopefully you're critically thinking about it. Okay, do I jump ship again? Do I put that blot on my resume of showing that I started a job and left 3 months later? Can I explain that? The whys, right? Why did you leave? And can you drill down? And I think you're right. There are a lot of people who didn't think that through or still are not thinking it through and are just sort of jumping, hoping to land eventually. And I won't make the full analogy with the dating again, but that's not the best look when jumping so much. And I think critical thinking plays such a huge part. And any final thoughts? I know I just threw a doozy of analogy out there as we're closing, but any final thoughts here on critical thinking, or what you want people to take away or do next, or call to action on how to make those next steps in critical thinking?
Well, I think the call to action is we've got 4 really great guests coming up.
There you go.
At least we may extend the series beyond that.
This could be a series, not a mini series. I'm not putting any pressure on you, but
could be a series and not a mini series. Absolutely. And please listen in to our subsequent episodes on this topic with open ears and open mind. And I appreciate you as a listener. So thank you.
So much content from Andrew Temte and his son and team, and working towards new offerings as well. Where can folks find it? To remind them, andrewtemte.com.
Yeah, andrewtemte.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Please like, subscribe, rate,
all of those things.
All those things.
And comment and share. And this is, we know when you find a podcast you love and you want it all to be yours because you want the tips, you want the tricks to move forward, it's tough to share with your colleagues and friends. Share the podcast. Send it on the internet, share it on Slack, post it on your LinkedIn. Make sure to tag Andy. And if you have questions, comments, Andy is very active over on LinkedIn and on his website as well. So don't forget that. Until next time, though, this has been The Balancing Act with Dr. Andrew Temte.